Hey, so I wanted to go over a couple of the questions for you, mainly question 9 and 10. All right, and so I'm going to share a whiteboard with you. And then I'll just kind of write this table up here. All right, so the table, I think you're just making it a little bit more complicated probably than it needs to be. And once you see how to do it, you'll understand. So goodness, I don't want that. The highlighter. So it gave you, for number 9, it gave you a table, and then g of x. And so it gives you -3, -2, -1, 0, 1, 2, 3. And then it gives you -7, -5, -3, -1, 3, 5, and 7. And then the next one gives you 8, 3, 0, -1, 0, 3, and 5. No, 8, sorry. Make sure I got that right. 8, 3, 0, -1, 0, 3, 8. Okay. And so I want you to find A is f of g of 1. Okay. And so what this is it's just a composite function. And so it's telling you to take f and you're going to input g of 1. So this is the first thing that you're going to look at. So that means you're going to go to g and your x here, this is x, is 1. So we go where x is 1 and we look at g. So that would be 0. So g of 1 is equal to 0. And so then we input that 0 into this one. So then we go to f and we want the x value to be 0, which is here, which is -1. So the answer to that one is -1. Okay. So B asks for f of g of -1. So you're doing f of g of -1. So what we're going to look at first is g of -1 right here. All right, so I'm going to take my highlighter, just highlight this. So here's my g, okay? And we want g of -1. So that means the x value is -1. So we go down and that's going to be 0. So that's 0. And so now we're doing f of 0. Okay. And so here's f and here's 0. And so that's also going to be -1. Okay. C is g of f of -1. All right. So this time g is written first. That means we're looking at, this is -1. We're looking at f of -1 first. Okay. So we go to our f. Here's f. And we're looking for -1, and that's going to be -3. Okay. And so that means you're looking now at g of -3. So we go to g and we go to -3, and that's going to be 8. Okay. Now we're looking at D, which says g of f of 0. And so we're doing g of f of 0. So we're doing f of 0 first. Okay, this is always first. So f of 0 is -1 because we go to 0 for your x and go down. So that's going to be -1. And now we're doing g of -1. So we go to g, we look for -1, and that's going to be 0. Okay. Then E is g of -2. And so what that means is g of -2. So that means we're going to go to g of -2 first. So here's -2. Your x value is -2. That's going to be equal to 3. And then you're going to do g of 3. So we go to 3, go down to g, and that's going to be 8. Okay. And then the last one is f of -1. So that's f of -1. So we go to f of -1 first. So here's f, here's -1 right here. It's going to be -3. And then you're going to do f again now of -3. And so that's going to be equal to -7. Okay. So that's how you do 9 and 10. I'm not going to do another one, but you're going to do the graph pretty similar. But let me do one of the examples of the ones on the bottom with the other problems. Let's do question 15. All right, and it gives you f of x is equal to 4x squared minus 3, and g of x is equal to 3 minus 1/2 x squared. And we want to find a is f of g of 4. Do that one first. So what that means is we're looking for g of 4 first, and then we plug that in, okay? So we want to go to g of 4. So we're going to use the g one, and we're going to plug in 4 here. So 3 minus 1/2 times 4 squared. So that's 16 times 1/2, which is 8. So 3 minus 8 is -5. And now we're going to plate that -5, and we're going to do f of -5. So we're doing f now, and we plug in -5. And so we end up with -5 squared is 25 times 4 minus 3. That's 100 minus 3. And that's going to give you 97. Okay. So that was A. I'll do one more of these. B is G of F of 2. Okay, so that means you're going to look at F first. And we're going to do F of 2. And so we plug in 2 here. 4 times 2 squared minus 3. That's 4 times 4 is 16 minus 3 is 13. And now we're going to do G of 13. So we go to our G. That's going to be 3 minus 1/2 times 13 squared. So that's what, 169, I believe. Yeah. 13 squared is 169 divided by 2. It's going to be 84.5. So 3 minus that is going to be a negative 81.5. Okay. So that's how you do 6.1. 6.2 is being able to find the inverse of functions. And so what the inverse is if I give you a set of data and let's say I give you f of x is equal to x plus 2, and I want you guys to be able to find the inverse of this. What this means is you literally switch your x and your y to find the inverse, okay? And you would write the inverse as this, f to the -1. And so remember, this stands for y. So if I was switching it, this would become y plus 2 equals x, technically. All right, and then we would solve for y, and so we would subtract 2. And so this becomes y equals x minus 2. So we would write this as the inverse of x equals x minus 2. So this would be the inverse of that. And if you actually do the composite of these two, so if I did, we can also call this, let's just call, we did f of -1 of x, you should end up with x. And if you do f of -1 of f of x, you should also end up with x. That means these are inverses. So if we check this, right, I'm going to input this one into that. So this is going to go into the place of the x up here. So this would be f of -1 of x. So I'm inputting my inverse into my function. This becomes x minus 2 plus 2. So those cancel and you're left with x. So I know that one's right. And then this one, you're going to take this function and plug it into that. So the f of -1 of f of x. You take this whole function, this whole function, because we're going with this first, and plug it into here. That's going to be x plus 2 minus 2, and those cancel, and you're left with x. Okay. So in order to find the inverses, you just switch your x and your y, and you can do that for ordered pairs or also equations. In a one-to-one function, so as we know, a function, your y values cannot repeat. For a one-to-one to be a function, your x or your y cannot repeat. So you have to have exactly one x, exactly one y. You cannot have any repeating. Okay. Let me know if you have any other questions, and I hope this helped some.